One of the easiest ways to stand out is by blending in, jumping on the trends that other celebrities and other businesses are setting. Now you're part of the broader cultural conversation that your prospects are having. We're going to talk about how to jump on trends and improve your business in this podcast.
Hey, welcome back to Blunt Force Business. I'm Brian LaFauci.
And I'm Patrick Marino.
And today we are talking about brand building through relevancy.
Ooh.
Yeah, and you know what our Blunt Force fact is, Patrick?
I don't know.
If people aren't talking about you, they are buying from someone else.
Okay. Expand on that a little bit.
From Jordan to Jay-Z, brands that everybody can just relate to and jump on board with. You know, there's this, business owners typically exist in an age range of fill in the blank.
I don't know, business owners?
Yes.
I would imagine the business owners probably on an average 52, 55.
55. All right, so probably higher than I would have put the estimate as. I would have probably said between the range of maybe your mid 30s up to where you just said, more of a range than average. That's
I'm thinking to myself that if you if you start a business, you're probably in your 30s.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, if you're leaving business and selling it, you're in your 60s or 70s.
Right.
So your average is right around 50 something. And if you keep your business, you're more likely to be older than you are, because most businesses don't last more than probably a couple of years. So younger people probably trend,
Yep.
a lot of younger people lose their business and they're not business owners anymore.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
That's what I was thinking.
So let's see.
And plus they say the 50s are your, those early 50-year-old years are your number one earning years.
Yeah,
so I'm
your
assuming
earning
that you're the owner at that point. You're the big boss at that point,
You are probably right. I definitely know a lot of people who are now in that age range, 40s to 50s, that if they weren't self-employed 10 years ago, they are now.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So, yes. And people that were self-employed in their 30s probably usually still are.
Yeah.
Right? They're still doing it. So, okay. The largest concentration, we'll say, is in that 40 to 50 range.
Yeah, I would think middle-aged people are more likely to be the guys who are, guys and girls who are kind of owning shit.
You mean young men like us?
Yeah, exactly.
Not the people owning shit. So let's kind of relate it back. I like the Jordan as the example because we can all, no matter what age you are, you relate to the Jordan brand. I mean, it's timely, it's classic, it's can
I reframe it for a second?
Mm-hmm.
So the people that own the company is not the right conversation. The consumer is the right conversation.
Okay.
Right? So if we're talking about branding, we're not talking about the people that own the business.
Mm-hmm.
They're the wrong people, right? We own it, right? And that's one of the reasons why marketing people who trend well on social media and those sorts of things are younger, because they understand what the consumer wants.
Right.
Right? The older person is irrelevant. We're in our irrelevant phase culturally.
Mm-hmm.
You're mid 40-year-old dude. They call it dad rock for a reason. We're irrelevant. Our relevancy culturally is done.
Dead.
It's been done for a long time.
Dead.
But if you're looking for what range you want, if you're a business owner, who do you want your consumer to be? It's people kind of in their early 30s.
Yes.
Mid 20s, when they start having enough income, and they make worse. When you're in your younger ages, you also make worse financial decisions generally. Mm-hmm. So that means that you are making impulse purchases. You're buying things you don't need. When you're a little bit older, you have more money, but you're also making more discretionary. You're more discretionary, generally speaking, with what you do. You're not buying things you don't need. You're not impulse purchasing. You're thinking things through a little bit more. So that's why that kind of 25-year-old to early 30s. And one of the things about the early 30s, which I think resonates with this conversation, is they are trending towards irrelevance culturally.
Yeah.
So they're holding on to it more. So I want to be, the need to be cool is strong.
Right.
With your early 30s. That's when you hear about the debates between the Generation Z and millennials, Generation Z making fun of millennials for trying to hold on because millennials were cool.
Right.
And now they're older now.
Right.
And I was like, oh shit, I'm not cool anymore, but they're trying to hold on. What can I hold on to? So it's where I think your conversation is going is we're kind of hitting those people. We're not talking about the 50-something-year-olds. We're talking about And maybe our podcast, if you're looking at a business owner,
Yep.
probably closer to our age.
Yep.
But in terms of the people we're trying to hit, 25 to 35, right? And also, if we get them at the younger ages, we've got a longer roadmap in keeping them with us as customers.
You got it.
Sorry, I interrupted.
You didn't. You got it, Queen. We'll come back to that. Baka.
Which nobody who listens to our podcast is going to understand. You're going to have to explain it.
But great point.
Yeah.
You don't know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
You don't know what I'm talking about. But what I'm talking about is something that a whole generation knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So we use the Jordan brand as an example. So for our listeners, let's kind of take them on this journey of why this matters for them. So you could become a Jordan. Like you could build your company to become a Jordan. You could build your good example, I think. Like let's take SpaceX. SpaceX, nobody knew about it. Now, 4 or 5 years later, everyone knows about it. They built a brand. They built a reputation. We can do that with other up-and-coming companies like that. NVIDIA. A lot of people know of NVIDIA as like the AI chip maker. Nobody knew of that company. Now it's got brand recognition. We can go on and on and on, right? With these key companies that were able to do that. But only a small percentage of companies are able to do that. Okay, so now let's take the rest of us that don't have this massive brand recognition, and we're going to play in the same space for attention as those companies. So when we put our little niche stuff out there, does it get the same grab? Does it get the same? And the answer is no. Right, so how do you leverage for example, the Jay-Z, the Jordan, the Baka, the Queen, how do you leverage these things that are trending, have weight to them, have social search weight to them, have all this stuff? And there's two schools of camps, I think, for business owners, especially, like you said, in that mid-age, right? And school of camp number one is, well, fuck that. I'm not doing that. Like, that's not who we are, right? Okay. School of camp number two is I'm gonna engage that, and I'm gonna like leverage off it, and we'll age ourselves a little bit with this example, but I think people our age can relate to it. I think about the gut milk campaign from when we were in our 20s, so about 20 years ago, right? Little maybe 25. There was this whole big push in the dairy industry, and they created this phenomenal marketing campaign, which was just gut milk, right? Black with white letters, said gut, and
Well, it was the mustache.
See, you remember it. 20-something years ago, you remember the gut milk campaign, right? And then Gap, which is a fading clothing brand now, but Gap did this whole campaign where every employee got black T-shirts that said gut jeans, and that was the uniform, right? So,
well, how about Gap did all these commercials for like khaki pants, where everybody was wearing the khaki pants and dancing around and being hip and cool and whatever. Do you know, this might be a Massachusetts thing, the furniture brand that absolutely took off on that and just ran with it was Jordan's Furniture. I don't know if you know Jordan's.
I do.
But Jordan's really got big by doing viral campaigns where they hopped onto that stuff. But they did like a commercial like the Gap, where it was like they were dancing around, but they were dancing around the furniture.
Yep.
It was very tongue-in-cheek.
Yep.
Sort of thing. And they did one as well. Do you remember the engineering commercial? I can't remember. It was a German car. See, I don't remember what the thing was. But they would put the little ball bearing on the car, and as it rolled smoothly, they'd be like, oh, they're doing the ball bearing thing. And Jordan's did a takeoff of that commercial, too, where they put like a little ball bearing on their couch. And like it rolled along. You're like, oh, they're doing the ball bearing thing.
Yeah.
So like it speaks to what Jordan's did.
Right.
People older dudes were definitely not. I mean, they're, one of them's retired. The other one's like, 80 something.
Yeah.
But they would have been in their 50s, and they were jumping on the trend to capitalize, and they built their brand that way.
And for our listeners, you have two choices here. But the reality is that embracing these trends as they're happening and embracing these things that have momentum, you remember the copycats, right? And the copycats got your attention because they piggybacked something that was pretty strong, had a lot of attention. So in my mind, steal away. Take the momentum of you want to eventually build your own. And you could say that in the region, Jordan's now does have the name recognition.
Oh God, Jordan's is massive. I mean,
Right.
they have stores in Rhode Island, don't they?
Yeah.
There's a big one in Warwick.
Yep. But as they're going on this journey, they kind of piggybacked these things that were there, that were existing, that were, that had.
No, they totally are an example of exactly what you said. And I think that for the business owner, so like, again, like those guys are good for the two reasons. One is because they did exactly like what you're talking about. They jumped on the trend. Two, they were sort of your standard. They were probably in their 50s at that point, right? And so like, I think you have a choice as you get, you and I have had this conversation. I think you are, of the two of us, you're definitely the trendier one. I'm definitely the more, the old man of the group. You have to make a determination of what your brand is going to be. Are you going to be the one that jumps on the trends or aren't you? I think that you should be authentic to yourself. So you are definitely authentically more like, I'm going to be fun and jump on trends, and I'm a little bit more stodgy old man guy, right?
Which is funny because I'm older than you.
Right, but like by 6 months or whatever.
No, that's
but like,
when
it's
we
all,
were 15, that mattered because you were 15, I was 15 and a half.
It's all personality, right? So you do have to be your authentic self, but you also have to think about what. Bringing back to my point is like, who is your customer, and then what's the lifetime value of your customer? Like if you're going after dudes in their 50s, your lifetime value of that customer is not as great.
Right.
But you also have to dial it back to, we have to bring it back to who are you marketing to and why?
Yeah.
Right. So if I am selling things for your home, like I bring it back to examples I know, like standby generator, right? So like how trendy do you want to be if you're selling standby generators? I'm not asking that as like there's a definitive answer. But if your target market is a 50 or 5-year-old dude, which was generally speaking who is buying standby generators, your trends are going to be very different when if your target is a 35-year-old woman or a 35-year-old man or a 25-year-old person. Right. And so like you have to do all the work that we've talked about in all of these other videos.
I think
who's the ideal customer?
Yeah, what makes the Jordan example relevant is you can back it in to say they knew that the person who was buying the Mercedes is the same person they want to buy the high-end couch.
Right.
Right. So you do have to track it there a little bit.
Well, also, I mean, you could even get more cynical, which we've done in the past too, and say, okay, well, let's have the conversation. Who's purchasing the couch? How old are they? And what's their gender? And by purchasing, I don't mean who's swiping the card, who's making the decision.
Yeah.
I'm asking you, tell me, you say it to the camera.
Well, in my house, I had 2 recliners delivered without asking.
Okay. So I'm thinking.
Hold on. No, wait.
Yeah.
It's not going to go the way you think, Baka. Right. I was quite Sigma on that decision.
Were they returned?
They almost were. Only eventually, after a couple of days, I got I like them, but don't do that again.
Yeah.
Like, don't furnish the house without asking me. I thought I was going to be the hero. I was the zero.
So let's trend that.
So I paid for it, but I meant the
So who's the person? How old and what gender were they?
They were the wife.
Yeah, and how old?
Well,
approximately. Yeah, at the time
in their 40s.
So like, who's going to resonate with those commercials?
Right.
So like one of the reasons why them hopping on that was so important is like who's the Gap consumer, right? Who's the person who's going to now recognize the Gap commercial?
Yeah.
It's going to be the woman in that age range.
Yeah.
Right. And so we're talking about that time frame too. So that was the the late 90s. So like now you have to do the same thing, right? And you figure out drill it down to who the person is. And you may find, like we've talked about this in the past too, again, we're dating ourselves, but hopefully the people that are our audience will recognize this. But the Gillette campaign, right? Be the
best a man can get.
Well, not just the best, not the best a man can get. The one where you the big tall black guy, who is the man that you want your man to be.
Oh, be the
the black guy who was like, he was like super built, and he was be the one who gives you like, so like what Gillette discovered was in their research was not that the man is making the decision on the man products. The woman is buying these products.
Right.
So we're going to make
right.
commercials that work for her.
Yeah.
And therefore,
yeah,
the campaign revolves around the ideal customer.
Yep.
So when you're choosing your trends, you got to make sure that you are choosing the trends that work for your ideal customer. So you want to be trendy, but not trend in the wrong way. Like you don't want to jump on the wrong trend.
Right.
Because you will confuse or piss off your customer.
But that's also
Bud Light and Dylan Mulvaney.
That was brilliant.
Right? You're jumping on a trend. They're like, okay, well, here's the trend.
Yeah.
Transgender pride.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Here's this person who is clearly trending and is trendy. We want to jump on this. Yeah. And they destroyed their brand.
Right.
Right? So you jump on the wrong trend. Who's your ideal customer?
Right.
Right? Who is the Bud Light ideal customer?
Right.
They were doing the math and saying, okay, we want to expand the audience.
Okay. Yeah.
But they went so far away from their core.
Right.
That they pissed off the core. And more so, they just confused the core.
Yeah.
Like, who's the core? It's freaking, now who's selling it now? It's Shane Gillis. And then who's the other guy? Super famous pop singer.
Kid Rock?
No.
Because
He's
Kid Rock
not super
hated
famous
it
anymore. But who's the one who's super famous now? Who's famous in all the genres? He's got tattoos all over his face.
Post Malone.
Post Malone, right? So who's selling Bud Light right now? It's Post Malone and Shane Gillis.
Yeah.
Right? So they never left the brand, but they're the core. Like, so you want to make sure that whatever you're trending is close enough to your core that you're not pissing people off. So sorry, I kind of went on the rant. But the idea is drill into when you decide to jump on a trend, make sure it's the right trend based on who your audience is. Don't try and be inauthentic. Is that fair?
It's very fair. I think it's just, so everything we're talking about right now is marketing. So we are talking about what, a marketing tactic that you can use to piggyback something that already has some legs, preferably something that is going to have a short-lived life.
Well, but now in 2025, everything has a short term.
Right, but will be remembered.
Yeah.
Right? So let's kind of give our listeners some advice. All right, how do I do this? So the first thing is to do what Patrick said and make sure you revisit your avatar.
Do the work.
Yeah, know who your avatar is. And that just might be like a quick revisit.
And I think it's okay to expand outside your audience. Like, that's what Bud Light was trying to do.
Yeah, but that's different.
Right, but I'm just saying, like, it's okay. Like, okay, let's say you've got a certain brand and you're like, look, I sell women's skincare and we need to sell the men. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have to do something a little bit different. You just have to make sure that you don't you can't piss off the core or confuse the core when you go into a new market.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. Like, so you can create something new and trend something new. You just can't be so confusing and so out there that you confuse or make it more difficult for your core people.
Yeah, and I think with this concept, if I was going to recommend where to start, it would be start with the thing that you do well.
Yeah.
And try to build off that. Mm-hmm. And then once you kind of get comfortable playing in the space, you can pivot. And
it depends on where you are. Like, how mature are you as a company? Are you mature where like you have to, are you starting where you're like, all right, I have to figure out who my core is. Where am I? Am I early stage? Yes. Figure out who my core is, market to my core. Or am I maturing now where it's like, you know what? Like, we've kind of gone stale. Mm-hmm. We have to, that's again, like, what was Bud Light doing? How do we expand the audience?
Yeah.
So, like, those are the decisions you have to make, and it depends on what stage you're at as a company.
Mm-hmm. So once you do that first step of identifying it, then the next thing is you really can just look at trends. Like, okay, what are men or women age 40 to 50? What are they watching on TV? Is there anything really?
Are they watching TV?
Right. Are they watching TV? What are they doing? Is there anything really trending in the space they're living in? And how can we maybe play off that? and integrate it into our marketing, whether it be, through a little video, through a post, through and trying to mimic, or everything we talked about today was mimicking and capitalizing on something that everyone would easily grasp and recognize.
What you have to do as a business owner is you have to get out of your comfort zone a little bit, right? So how do you figure out what's trending in 2025? There's a way simpler answer than trying to figure out what people are watching on TV.
Go ahead.
Instagram and TikTok.
Well,
That's it. It's just Instagram and TikTok.
Yes.
That's what everybody's consuming. YouTube, Instagram and TikTok. This is what people are consuming. So if you want to, and this is where one of our previous conversations, the fractured internet comes into play, because you can't go based on what you're seeing.
Right.
Because you are not necessarily the audience. If you are the audience, great. Then you sell to yourself. But if you are Jordan's Furnitures and you own a furniture store and the people purchasing the furniture are 35 to 40-year-old women,
yep,
then you have to go to those spaces, right? So again, you go to Instagram, you go to TikTok, and you check out, you start searching so that your algorithm has to change. You have to change your algorithm. Otherwise, it's going to pull in all the stuff that you're interested in. And do searches on hashtags or topics that potentially could be in that frame.
Yep.
Because one of the reasons that you're going to bring up, I know you're going to bring it up, is that like if you really sit in the space, if you are a good father and you're in the space of your kids and you're sitting next to them while they're kind of going through YouTube Shorts or TikTok or whatever, like I hear the same stuff over and over and over and over and over again, and they're not watching the same video over and over and over again. The algorithm picks up on the audio and the topic, and that's the trending thing. And a lot of what the algorithm does is it forces all these creators to kind of do a version of it. Right? They're all jumping on the trends. So that's how something becomes trendy, right? It's because all these other people. Ooh. I'm getting too animated. All these other people are jumping on the.
You didn't break your computer.
No, I hope
That's
not.
a win. No.
All these other people are jumping on the trends.
Yeah.
Right, and so like that's how something becomes trendy. Is all
Right.
these other people from the algorithm are they're seeing it and they're jumping on. They want views.
Right.
Right. So that's how, as a marketer or as a business owner, you can figure it out. Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. Start searching for things, do your work ahead of time, figure out how old they are, what are they interested in, and now start searching and start seeing this type of stuff that comes on. Because you might now be able to create a short video that jumps in on the trend. Yeah. And now you're part of the feed for that person.
Yeah. And one of the examples that recently I thought was great that someone did was, do you remember, it was probably about 7-8 months ago, there was that big push with Kardashian and the demure and all those those words that they were using, like those kind of uppity words they were using. Shannon remembers, right? From the show. And then it kind of it got a little traction, and then other people were doing it. So we had a business owner that we knew that did this whole social media campaign, and it was perfect because he's kind of got like a trendy restaurant, and his clientele is definitely the clientele that would like watch that. So he just went around his restaurant and filmed these little clips of him using the words that they were using, like this coffee is so demure, and then it was brilliant, right? And it's just playing on pop culture and being a little trendy with it, right? He is not the audience. To your point, he's not watching that shit. That's like at all.
But
he recognized it. Yeah. Took a couple minutes to learn about it. Probably got his daughter involved, right? And then just replicated it. Mm-hmm. That's what we're saying. Be the Nike, be the Jordan. Replicate those things that already have some trendy brand recognition. Don't be the curmudgeon that says, I'm not doing that. There's no benefit there.
Well,
there is no benefit.
I'm going to push back a little bit and say, be yourself, right? But also know your audience. Mm-hmm. So it's like, if you're going to be selling stuff, mm-hmm. you have to be selling it to them where they're at. So part of being where they're at is being on their trend. But if your product is not, he owns a trendy little restaurant in the middle of a city where he needs a certain type of age of person.
Yes.
If my core people is not that, me doing a bunch of trendy videos is not going to work. If my core person resonates with Shane Gillis and Post Malone and country music, and I start promoting a transgender activist, I lose my whole brand.
Right.
So that's why you have to, you can't just be, you can be the curmudgeon if you are doing it for the right reason.
True. But
You know
I
what I mean?
think
You have to make sure that you are, it's here.
Yeah.
Who's the core audience?
Yeah.
Sell to
you
those
can always
people.
find it. Even if you, we're talking a lot about Instagram, social media, but let's take.
But I think Instagram and social media is it.
I agree, except let's take one other example. Like Netflix, to me, is a trend creator for the 40-year-old. It really is.
Right.
I'll go to dinner with friends, and one of the topics always come up.
What are you
watching on Netflix?
Yeah.
So, and stuff that's trending has these little like Rip from Yellowstone that had legs. Right. Everyone knew who he was,
right?
And he had a brand. He had a brand, and you could leverage that. You could if that was your audience, you could leverage something like that. And that came out of Netflix than it did out of social media,
right? But I think that the reason why, you're still back to. The reason why I'm bringing the social media part up to a certain extent is because you won't necessarily be as aware that that's trending as hard just by talking to people. Like you're going to see if it's trending, if it's big, you're going to see it on social media.
Let's just agree to disagree. Queen.
Let's not even think it's agree to disagree. I think maybe I'm being the curmudgeon in this point. But I just think that if you're going to be doing your research, you're doing your research on YouTube, on Instagram, and on TikTok as a business owner.
Well,
and you are gonna be talking to people in the streets, but the busier you are, the harder it's gonna be. You know what I mean?
Perfect. Well, bottom line, the blunt force fact: if people aren't talking about you, they're buying from somewhere else. So leverage the trends, leverage the brands that are out there, be the Jordan, right? And make something that already has attention to it and integrate it into what you're doing.
Jump on the trend, then be a part of the trend, then you're a part of the conversation.
And do the things that Patrick, you did a great job of laying out. Like, yes, but make sure you're doing A, B, and C.
Yeah, we always relate to our core stuff, right? Don't forget your core principles.
Back to the hotel.
Remember, we got to make money.
Yeah.
And we got to stick to the basics. That's one of our blunt force facts is you got to make sure you dial in, put it on the calendar, all the things we talk about all the time. If you're just jumping on trends without doing the work, probably gonna get yourself into trouble.
Or you'll waste time.
Or you're just wasting time, most of our business owners, wasting time is just as bad as anything else.
Absolutely.
Because we don't have that.
Good stuff.
Right.
All right. I'm Brian LaFauci.
Patrick Marino.
Until next time.
Thank you.